Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll do an in-depth healer performance review and we're looking at the best healers for raids, best healers for Mythic Plus. We'll be ranking them in certain order in terms of what they can provide. We'll be looking at the data that's available because there's new healing styles that have emerged in patch 8.3, specifically Haste Mistweaver build, which is still relatively new and the data is kinda hard to determine what is going to rise and things like that, but we'll talk about the Haste Mistweaver. We'll talk about Mythic Plus performance. We'll be talking about our predictions for MDI and what healers are going to choose in terms of what healers are going to be strong. First of all, before I do any kind of these videos, I always say a disclaimer. If you're not doing high-end content, you don't have to really worry about this. You don't have to play the best healer because it's the best, because you might not enjoy the playstyle. But at the same time, I do have to mention that if you are planning on pugging content, primarily pugging content or solo content in World of Warcraft, there is community perception in Mythic Plus. There is even community perception in Mythic raiding, in entry-level Mythic raiding, where certain healing classes are going to be performing better than others. So I feel like a lot of the times your choice might be dictated based on whether you're going to be playing this game in solo or pug scenarios or joining a proper guild that's going to appreciate whatever healing class you're going to be playing. So keep this in mind, but let's get started with the raiding scenarios or raiding healer balance, and then we'll move on to the Mythic Plus at the end of the video. Let's go. So if we look at the healer performance in Ny'alotha, primarily mythic scenarios, if you watch any of the World First Race videos or streams from Method and Limit, you probably have noticed that the majority of the healer composition was composed by 3 different healers, and that would include Holy Paladin, Discipline Priest, and Resto Shaman. And there's a specific reason for why these healers were so strong during the World First Race and why they kept continuing to be strong into the farm content, into, you know, if you're doing mythic content right now, they're still very strong. Specifically speaking, if we look at the HPS chart right here, it is very, very misleading. You see Holy Priest being as a top HPS healer, and they're nowhere close to being the top healer in raiding scenarios, because believe it or not, HPS is not the main marker for a good healer in raid scenarios or in progression raiding. And we'll talk about that later on. But if you look at Holy Paladin performance, in my opinion, Holy Paladin has probably been the best raid healer right now, and there are a couple of reasons for this. Not only Holy Paladin is going to provide one of the top tier HPS, it also provides passive DPS, it also has damage reduction cooldowns like Devotion Aura, on top of the fact that he has no mana issues whatsoever. So you have all of this strengths of a single healer, and no one else can even compete to what Holy Paladin or a good Holy Paladin player can contribute to a raiding team. And this is kind of backed up if you actually go to the parsers of healers. You can notice that Paladins are one of the most popular healers right now in Mythic Ny'alotha, and this is where I talk about Holy Priests. Maybe Holy Priests are topping healing meters right now, but if you actually go to bosses that really matter, that are really hard, like for example Carapace. Carapace might not be that hard, but it is one of the end tier bosses. If you look at the number of parsers, you can see that the meta is emerging. Paladin, Priest, Shaman. If you go to the last boss, and that is Ny'alotha, if you go to the parsers or the number of parsers that are available for each healer, Paladin, Priest or Discipline Priest, and Shaman. You can't see Holy Priest there because there's a specific reason. Again, Holy Priest might be one of the best HPS throughput healers, but it's not what makes a raid healer an amazing healer. You have to have a lot more in this meta or in this patch 8.3 healer meta right now to be considered the best. Don't get me wrong, Holy Priest is still a very good beginner's healer and still a very good pure HPS healer, and it definitely can find its way in one of the end bosses. But I still feel Holy Paladin, Discipline Priest, and Resto Shaman are probably going to compose your core healing raid composition. So let's look at the best, or in my opinion, based on the data, based on the streams, one of the most popular healer compositions for Mythic Ny'alotha. And I feel that's going to include 2 Holy Paladins, 1 Discipline Priest, and 1 Resto Shaman. So I do feel the Discipline Priest has kind of fallen down when you compare it to Eternal Palace. In Eternal Palace, the damage patterns were a lot more suited towards Discipline Priest burst healing cooldowns. And Ny'alotha is a lot more continuous damage. Don't get me wrong, Discipline Priest is still good at dealing with continuous damage, but I don't feel it's as good as it was in Eternal Palace. And this is why you saw a lot of the mythic raiding guilds, a lot of the top end world first kills, including 1 Discipline Priest instead of 2. You saw that Holy Paladins, or at least 2 Holy Paladins, were used for a lot of the world first fights, and without a doubt, I have to say, Holy Paladin probably is right now the best raid healer because of the things that I mentioned. Resto Shaman is really climbed in the potential of a raid healer. The pure healing or stacked healing that you get from healing rain, chain heal and things like that has been really strong. Also the fact that Vision of Perfection has been buffed and Vision of Perfection has become the best or probably the most popular major essence used by every single Resto Shaman in raiding situations has meant that their healing tide, the contribution has been increased by a lot more and the HPS has kind of caught up. And the fact again, utility, utility, utility. Healing Tide Totem, Spirit Link Totem, Windrush Totem is insanely strong for a lot of the fights. And I mean it. There might be certain fights like Carapace where you have to have Windrush Totem. You cannot do a fight without having a Windrush Totem. And we're talking about mainly Mythic Carapace and things like that. And fights like Mythic Ny'alotha, Spirit Link is extremely, extremely strong. You might have to have a Resto Shaman to beat those bosses, or it'll give you a direct advantage because of the cooldowns of Resto Shaman. And after that you have all the other healers. Resto Druid has received a buff, but it's still nowhere near a mandatory healer, and I do feel Resto Druid to some extent is still one of the weakest healers because the fact is their niche is not good. They're pure healer. They're in the pure healing throughput niche, combating with Holy Priest. And they're not even beating them at the same time because they can't provide passive DPS, so it's a lot harder for them to do it. They don't have damage reduction cooldowns. Holy Priest is in the same boat, but their pure healing throughput is actually pretty insane. So I do feel Resto Druid to some extent is one of the weakest raid healers, but they're a lot better in Mythic Plus, and we'll talk about that very soon. I do have to mention Mistweaver Monk and Haste Fist Weaving build that has been very, very strong right now. It has achieved some of the biggest HPS numbers. On top of that, if you look at the damage or the DPS of healers, you can see that Mistweaver Monk Kick Weaving Rising Mist build is actually pretty good in terms of providing passive DPS. So all of a sudden you could argue the fact that Mistweaver might be the 4th best healer, maybe a bit higher. It is too early for me to say because even though Haste Fist Weaving can output one of the highest HPS numbers, first, it is really hard to attain the gear to perform Haste Fist Weaving properly. You need to have a lot of haste. You might even need to have more haste in order to bring up the enveloping mist into the build. And there's a new haste fist weaving build with enveloping mist, where you're trying to cast as many enveloping mists and try to keep them up throughout the whole fight. But you need to have an insane amount of haste to do that. But if you reach that breakpoint, you're actually quite efficient in terms of your mana throughput because you don't have to recast enveloping mist, you can just extend it. So all of a sudden, Haste Fist Weaving is very, very hard to determine its position in Mythic raiding. At the same time, you can output one of the best HPS in the game with like 20k DPS, which is insane. You might not have strong defensive cooldowns in terms of like Devotion Aura or like Barrier. For Discipline Priest, you still have Revival, which is okay, but your healing is insane. But I have to mention, attaining the gear is really hard. It is a very hard playstyle because it is so high in APM, actions per minute. You need to really, really practice it. In my opinion, it's one of the hardest healer playstyles if you start including Enveloping Mist into your rotation and try to extend those as well, on top of Renewing Mist, on top of making sure your Thunder Focus Tea is not being wasted on all of that things. It can become really, really hectic. So depending on a fight, I would definitely rank Haste Fist Weaving as one of the best healers. Again, depending on a fight, if it allows for you to get that 100% uptime on a boss and things like that, and if you have the right gear, the right amount of haste, and if you're actually a really good player, you can make this as one of the best healers in the game in terms of pure HPS, and in terms of the damage that it provides is actually pretty good as well. But at the same time, I feel the barrier of entry is pretty high. If you look at the top logs right now for Mistweavers, everyone's going that Rising Mist. Everyone's going that haste building with Misty Peaks and things like that, stacking Misty Peaks. All of the top logs are using this build right now. At the same time, it wasn't included in World First Skills because it wasn't discovered at that time. Not a lot of people were running it, so it's hard to include it in the list. At the same time, I feel it is a good build to try out in Raids and Mythic Plus at this given point. Thank you guys for watching this video. I really want to hear your opinions about this Haste Fist Weaving build. Keep in mind that a lot of the information here is mainly aimed at Mythic raiding. You don't have to play the best healer for heroic, for normal content, but I know there is community perception attached to it. But I really want to know your opinion about which healer you're progressing in Ny'alotha at the moment. Keep in mind that this video was initially going to be one video, and I wanted to split it up because it was insanely long. So if you want to check out the Mythic Plus version, the healer rankings for Mythic Plus, which healer is doing really well, which healer is the underdog and things like that, check out the link in the description. I'm probably gonna have a comment pinned at the top as well. That's going to be released in the next couple of days as well, so watch out for that video. Keep in mind, this was initially going to be one video, but I split it up. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know if you enjoyed the content, subscribe and all of that. It really helps me to continue doing these kind of videos. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next guide.